According to the Chief Deputy Registrar, when Candler County did their audits for the previous election, there were 0 discrepancies and everything was 100% accurate. This has been Abby Choosewood with Eagle News.
An aspiring reporter working as a babysitter accused of suffocating a toddler in her care. We look at the disturbing case out of Georgia and how it could have come together. I'm Angenette Levy, and welcome to Law and Crime Sidebar podcast. Abby Choosewood is a 23-year-old woman who looks like the all-American girl. But police in Gainesville, Florida say she nearly killed a 1-year-old child she was babysitting. Choosewood is free on bail. She was arrested recently on charges of cruelty to children and felony aggravated assault. And let me tell you, what you are about to hear is incredibly disturbing. This happened in February, according to police, but the investigation took a lot of time, so Choosewood was just recently arrested. Her website says she wanted to work as a sideline reporter for ESPN after graduating from college. She even has a YouTube channel with some of her work posted.
Over 21 volunteers around the state gathered today in Savannah, Georgia to help assist with the oyster cleanup that provides safe estuaries for oysters. This is Abby Choosewood with Eagle News.
Now, this isn't Choosewood's first brush with the law. Last September, Choosewood pleaded guilty to 1 count of financial transaction card theft and 2 counts of financial card fraud. She is serving 2 years probation on that case. Joining me to discuss the allegations in this incredibly disturbing case is Lieutenant Kevin Holbrook of the Gainesville Police Department in Georgia. They worked on this case. Lieutenant Holbrook, welcome to Sidebar. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate it.
Tell us a little bit about how you came to make an arrest in this case. Obviously, we know you're limited in what you can say because the case is pending, but you have a 1-year-old suffering from some injuries, no nanny cam. So where do you go from there?
Yeah, this was one of those cases that you never want to see come across your desk. It was one that was originally brought to us by the Department of Family and Children's Services. This was a case that was kind of done backwards from a law enforcement perspective because the child received the injuries. The child then went to a children's hospital in Atlanta. At that point, the medical staff realized that there was something more going on here than just an accident, just based off of the injuries. So they contacted the Department of Family and Children's Services, who then completed a welfare check for the child, and that's how we became involved in the initial investigation.
So that you have no nanny cam in this case, correct?
So we really did not have much to go on other than the medical reports from the hospital. The investigators began working at trying to piece together the timeline of events of when these injuries could have occurred, and then began working the investigation from there based off of that timeline. We were able to narrow it down to a timeline where there were only a few people that had or would have come in contact with the child.
Let's face it, after a night with drinks, we don't all bounce back the next day like we used to. We have choices to make. Do I have a great night or a great day tomorrow? Well, this little thing, ZBiotics, can make that decision much easier. No one wants to be stuck in the house the next day, missing a workout or work because of a night out on the town. ZBiotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. ZBiotics produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. It's designed to work like your liver, but in your gut where you need it most. Just remember to drink ZBiotics before drinking alcohol, drink responsibly, and get a good night's sleep to feel your best tomorrow. Drinking ZBiotics before drinking makes such a difference the next day. Even after drinks the night before, I know you'll be able to do that 20-mile bike ride or that Pilates class. Labor Day weekend is right around the corner, so make sure you stock up before that long weekend. Your friends and family will thank you. Go to ZBiotics.com/sidebar to get 15% off your first order when you use Sidebar at checkout. You can also sign up for a subscription using my code so you can stay prepared no matter the time or occasion. ZBiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantee, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/sidebar and use the code SIDEBAR at checkout for your 15% off. Thanks so much to ZBiotics for sponsoring this episode. How severe were the child's injuries? Obviously taken to the hospital, so the child is still alive. But are we talking about injuries so severe that there's brain damage? I mean, what can you tell me about that, if anything?
This is one of those where we're very, very fortunate that the child even lived, much less lived without any significant ongoing brain damage. This is a case in which the child was probably as close to death as you can get. The child received numerous injuries, numerous broken bones, to include a femur. A femur is one of the strongest bones we have in our bodies, and the fact that this child was living with this broken femur, and then we look even further as petechia around the mouth and the eyes, which is something that we all too often look for when we do autopsies. We look for that as a death investigation surrounding strangulation, choking, those types of cases. So the fact that this child showed up with that petechia at the hospital was something that we rarely see. So that was something that we knew that there was really more to this than just a simple injury.
Do you know if the child was actually strangled or smothered with a pillow? I mean, do we have markings on the neck? Do we know exactly what happened?
So one of the things is there was a ton of bruising. We looked at the broken bones, the petechia. We knew at some point there had to be the strangulation type case, whether it was something, a pillow over the face, blanket, strangulation around the neck. We knew at some point this child had lost a great deal of airway, but we still don't know exactly how that happened. And that's something hopefully that'll come out in court. But we know that, the child was within a near-death experience. We narrowed it down to Abby Choosewood, who was the caretaker, nanny, babysitter at the time of the incident. And through that investigation, everything kept pointing back to Choosewood. And that's ultimately what led us to those charges and her being charged in this case.
How long had Abby Choosewood been babysitting this child? I mean, was this the first time she had been babysitting the child? I mean, was this something where she was a regular babysitter?
To my knowledge, she was what I would consider a family friend, someone that had babysat this child and other children. It's one of those that this case was brought to us in February. We wanted to ensure that we did a thorough investigation. At the time, we knew that the child was safe. So we were able to take our time with the investigation to make sure we did a thorough investigation. We were working with the local hospital. We had to file for medical reports. And it's one of those that we may never know the situation or circumstances surrounding this incident. But again, we're very fortunate that we're not talking about a death incident here. We're fortunate that this child will hopefully fully recover the best that they can with the significant injuries that they had. But it's one of those that we don't know exactly what happened in that house. We'll probably never know. And we're just hoping that it didn't occur to any other children.
And it makes me wonder, had the child been harmed before, but just not as severely?
And that's something that we look at is trying to talk with the family to determine, hey, have there been any different types of incidents, any bruising, any, even at 1 year old, you start seeing behavioral issues with that child. So, those are all things that we look at because you have, unfortunately, a child that can't speak for themselves. So ultimately, we, the doctors, the parents, we have to be the voice for that child and it's a really sad situation, especially when it comes to something like this. And the level of charges that were brought upon her are very serious.
It's been about 6 months now, so the child is now around 18 months old. How is the child doing?
It's one of those that when you look at it, it's almost a fortunate situation that hopefully the child will not remember everything. Hopefully the child was young enough that they won't remember the pain, the suffering that they had to go through to get to this point. But even as an 18-month-old, with the broken bones, to include a broken femur, those are things that are still taking time to heal. And the psychological, the emotional drama, the trauma that that child has gone through is something that the child may never recover from. So that's why we can only hope that the child will not have those lasting memories of this tragic day that they went through.
Do we know though if the child's brain is going to be okay? I'm thinking, deprivation of oxygen and things like that.
Yeah, anytime when you look at the deprivation of oxygen, you look at the body being without oxygen for so long. There's going to be lasting effects, and that's something that the doctors are going to look into in this case. It may have been 6 months ago, but this child has years and years ahead of them to determine exactly what effects are going to be lingering and how long those effects are going to be lingering. It's something that we may not know for years to come until this child can fully develop and the doctors can determine exactly what may possibly be wrong.
Was Abby Choosewood ever interviewed about this case?
This is one of those where, with it being uh, an open case still, the case has not yet been adjudicated. We're very limited on what we can say. She was brought in for questioning as far as the information that was developed in that interview is something that will come out in court. Uh, as far as the extent of that interview goes, we can't really say much yet because it is still a very active and ongoing investigation.
Was she surprised when she was taken into custody?
It's one of those cases where many times we do run into individuals who are surprised, who act surprised when they see that law enforcement official show up, that phone call come in. This is one of those that surprised would not be the word that I would use. Um, it's many times in interviews you can talk to someone and you can somewhat feel the sympathy. Again, this is one of those cases where I wouldn't use that word. Um, it's a very hard case for the investigators that had uh, the case, had to work on this case, and many times they don't necessarily get that sympathy or that outcome that they're looking for. But again, that's something that she'll have to answer for in court, and she'll have her day in court, and ultimately, so will this young child.
Well, Lieutenant Holbrook, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. A horrible, horrible case. And we just, our thoughts and prayers are with the child and the child's family. And again, thank you for your time.
No, we appreciate it. And again, you mentioned nanny cam. Uh, Many people look at it as Big Brother watching, but even the closest loved one that you have watching over your child, you may never really know. So we always ask that you please take those extra steps. Whether it be a nanny cam, whatever it may be, you can never protect your children enough.
Most certainly. Always have some eyes watching because in this day and age, any day and age, you just never know what could go on. And I think this is an important thing too, not just for infants, of course, children, babies, but also if you have elderly loved ones as well. I mean, it makes me think of that too. If you have elderly loved ones who could be subject to such a thing.
Most certainly, sadly and enough, there's predators for the young and the old, and we see it all too often. But we appreciate you. We hope to do some follow up after this case is adjudicated, after everyone has their day in court, and we can provide you with definitely some further information on this case.
Well, we look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Thank you for having us.
I also spoke with Florina Altshiler. She's currently a defense attorney, but also a former prosecutor who used to prosecute cases involving children being abused. I asked her how you start in a case like this where a 1-year-old child can't speak.
The answers are often in cases like this in the medicine. And so, depending on what the injuries are and depending on what the science shows to support those injuries, some can be accidental, some can be naturally caused, and some very clearly have a criminal underlying causation. And so really it's going to be a question of what do the physicians in the hospital or medical facilities say, and what does the investigation say with regard to what the child's injuries are.
And that's it for this edition of Law and Crime Sidebar podcast. You can listen to and download Sidebar on Apple, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts. And of course, you can always watch it on Law and Crime's YouTube channel. I'm Angenette Levy, and we will see you next time.